The night air was thick with tension. The White House, the most secure location in America, stood as a beacon of power and control. But tonight, it would become a battlefield. President Henry Lawson sat behind his desk in the Oval Office, oblivious to the horror unfolding outside. His chief of staff, Emily Carter, stood by the door, a phone pressed to her ear. The Secret Service was on high alert. Something was wrong, very wrong. A frantic voice crackled through the radio. Perimeter breach. Repeat, perimeter breach. We have unknown hostiles, Jesus Christ, they're not going down. Agent Tom Harris, one of the president's top security personnel, sprinted into the room. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Sir, we need to move. Now. Lawson frowned. What's going on? We're under attack, Harris said, gripping his earpiece. But it's not terrorists. It's something else. Before Lawson could demand more answers, a deafening alarm blared through the White House. Red emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Emily's phone buzzed with a priority alert from the Pentagon, biological threat detected. Shelter immediately. Then, the gunfire started. The distant pops of suppressed shots turned into panicked bursts of automatic fire. Screams echoed down the hallways. A voice on the radio shouted, "They're inside. My God, they're inside. Move. Get the president to the bunker." Harris ordered, yanking Lawson to his feet. Emily followed, her heart hammering. The West Wing erupted into chaos. Secret Service agents unloaded round after round at the figures storming the entrance. But the intruders didn't fall like normal attackers. Bullets barely slowed them down. Some agents had already been dragged to the ground, their screams turning to gurgles as they were torn apart. Harris led the president and Emily through a side corridor, but before they could reach the underground bunker entrance, a blood-soaked agent staggered toward them. His face was twisted in agony, his eyes blackened. "Help me," he rasped, then lunged. Harris fired twice. The agent collapsed, but even after taking 2 direct shots to the chest, he still tried to crawl forward. Headshots. It has to be the head. Emily shouted, realizing the horrifying truth. Harris aimed and fired again. The agent went still. They rounded another corner, nearly colliding with 2 more security personnel. "East Wing's gone," one of them panted. "We lost contact with the outer teams. There's no stopping them." A sickening realization dawned on Emily. If they got in that easily, this isn't an accident. This was planned. Lawson, still in shock, whispered, "Planned? You mean, someone let them in?" The sound of shattering glass cut off their conversation. A bloodied White House staffer crashed through a window, her body convulsing as someone, ripped into her throat. "Go! Move!" Harris yelled, shoving the president forward. They reached the emergency bunker entrance, but before they could enter, an explosion rocked the building. The ground shook violently. Smoke and dust filled the hallway. Emily coughed, blinking through the haze. What the hell was that? Harris's radio crackled. "Bunker compromised." "Repeat, bunker compromised." "We have," the transmission cut off in static. A cold chill ran down Emily's spine. The one place they thought was safe, wasn't. Lawson clenched his fists. "We can't stay here." Before anyone could respond, another shriek echoed down the corridor. The shadows at the end of the hallway shifted, dozens of figures moved in unison, their eyes empty, their jaws slack. The dead had found them. Harris lifted his gun. "Fall back. Oval Office, now." As they sprinted back toward the president's office, Emily realized the terrifying truth. If the White House, the fortress of American power, could fall in a matter of minutes, Nowhere was safe. The heavy doors of the Oval Office slammed shut behind them. Agent Tom Harris locked it, panting as he pressed his body against the barricade. Outside, the White House halls were filled with the guttural moans of the undead. The air smelled of blood, gunpowder, and something rotten. President Henry Lawson paced, his face pale. We were supposed to be protected. The White House is a fortress. Emily Carter, his chief of staff, wiped sweat from her forehead. Not anymore, sir. We need to figure out what we're dealing with. If this was an attack, someone made sure we wouldn't have a way out. The bunker was supposed to be their last line of defense, but now it was compromised. If whoever unleashed this nightmare planned it well enough to breach the White House, then they had likely taken out every contingency. Agent Harris checked his ammo. Only a few magazines left. He looked at the two remaining security personnel, Agents Reed and Vasquez, both gripping their weapons like lifelines. We need a plan, Harris said. We can't just sit here waiting to die. Vasquez cursed under her breath. There's no backup. I tried radioing out, static. No response from the Pentagon, no response from Homeland. If the virus is spreading beyond the White House. She didn't finish the thought. Emily clenched her jaw. We have to assume Washington is falling. Suddenly, a muffled thump echoed from inside the room. Everyone froze. The sound hadn't come from the hallway. It came from the bunker access door in the president's private study. Harris motioned for everyone to stay back. He crept forward, gun raised. The door was a reinforced steel hatch, meant to withstand an assault. But now it was dented. Deep scratch marks lined the surface, as if something had clawed at it from the inside. Then, the door shook violently. A low, guttural growl seeped through the cracks. Emily's stomach twisted. Something is inside the bunker. Lawson's face went slack. How? That place was locked down before we even left. Harris's expression darkened. Which means someone infected got in before the doors shut. A sickening realization washed over them. The bunker, their supposed safe haven, had turned into a tomb. And whatever was inside wanted out. The pounding on the steel intensified. A deep, inhuman snarl erupted from behind it, followed by a sickening crack. The door bulged outward as if something had slammed into it with impossible force. That door won't hold forever, Reed muttered. We need to move. Harris nodded. We need to get out of the White House. There's a service tunnel that leads to the Treasury building. If we can get there, we might still have a way out. Lawson hesitated. And go where? If Washington is falling, hell, if the country is falling, where do we run? Emily met his gaze. Anywhere but here, Mr. President. A series of loud bangs cut off the conversation. Then, silence. Harris tightened his grip on his weapon. Something's wrong. Then, in the eerie stillness, they heard it. The lock on the bunker door slowly turning. Emily's breath caught in her throat. That's not possible. And then, the door burst open. Something lunged out of the darkness. A man, or what was left of him, dressed in the tattered remains of a Secret Service uniform. His skin was gray, his mouth a gaping maw of blackened teeth, his eyes milky white with hunger. But worst of all, the name tag on his uniform read, Agent Saunders. The man who had locked the president inside the bunker. Except now, he was one of them. Saunders moved fast, too fast. He threw himself at Vasquez before she could react, sinking his teeth into her neck. She screamed, blood spraying the polished desk behind her. Harris fired, 1, 2, 3 shots, all to the head. Saunders crumpled, finally dead. But Vasquez. She staggered back, clutching her throat. No, 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 please. The infection was instantaneous. Her veins blackened, her pupils dilated. Her breath turned into a sickening, wheezing gasp. I don't, her words were cut off as her body convulsed. Reed didn't hesitate. One shot. Right between the eyes. Vasquez fell. The president stumbled back, pressing his back against the wall. His face was drained of color. My God. Emily's hands were shaking. We have to go. Now. But before they could even move, another sound echoed from the hallway. More moans. And then, scraping metal. Emily's blood ran cold as she turned toward the bunker door. It was still open. And behind it, more figures began to emerge. At least 6. No, 10. All of them former White House security. All of them undead. Harris grabbed the president. Oval Office's side exit, GO. They ran. Behind them, the bunker creatures gave chase. The White House wasn't just compromised. It was lost. The Oval Office's side exit led into a long hallway, one that should have been empty. Instead, it was crawling with the dead. Emily barely had time to think before Harris yanked her back, shoving the president behind them. Stay close. We're cutting through the Roosevelt room. Reed fired a short burst into the oncoming horde. 3 bodies dropped, but the others kept coming. The sound of gunfire only attracted more. Emily turned toward the Roosevelt room's double doors and threw her weight against them. Locked. Harris, she yelled. The agent slammed his shoulder into the door once, twice. On the third try, the lock gave way. They tumbled inside and shoved the door shut behind them. Outside, the undead slammed against the barrier, moaning, scratching, pounding. The wooden doors wouldn't last long. President Lawson leaned against the table, gasping for breath. How the hell did it come to this? Harris ignored him, sweeping the room with his gun raised. We're clear. Drop your weapons. The voice came from the far side of the room. The click of safeties being flipped off followed. Emily turned slowly. A group of 5 men and women stood by the windows, all armed. Some wore White House staff uniforms, others were dressed in security gear, but their eyes weren't full of fear. They were full of determination. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a Secret Service vest stepped forward. Harris? His voice was tight with disbelief. Harris's gun remained steady. Fox? Agent Daniel Fox. Another member of the president's security detail. Except Fox wasn't with them when the outbreak started. We thought you were dead, Harris said cautiously. Fox shook his head. No. Just left behind. Emily's mind raced. If Fox and these people had survived this long, they must have had a plan. Fox turned to the president. Mr. President. I'd say it's an honor, but... He gestured to the blood-smeared windows. Not exactly the best day for democracy. Lawson straightened. Agent Fox, we need to get out of here. The White House is compromised. We can use the Treasury tunnel. Fox laughed, but there was no humor in it. Treasury's gone, sir. We checked. The tunnels were flooded with infected hours ago. Emily's heart sank. Then what's your plan? Fox exchanged glances with his team. We're staying. Harris tensed. What? You don't get it, do you? Fox's voice turned sharp. This isn't just a random outbreak. Someone did this, and they made sure the government wouldn't survive it. Emily's mind snapped to the same terrifying conclusion. You think this was an assassination? Fox nodded grimly. Not just an assassination. A coup. Silence fell over the room. Fox continued, Look, the first breach was too fast. The White House has protocols for biological threats, but this virus, it spread in minutes. There was no warning, no time to react. Someone wanted this place to fall. Emily swallowed. If that was true, then there was something much worse at play than just zombies. The president rubbed his temples. If someone planned this, then where the hell is the military? Fox gave him a dark look. Exactly. We've heard nothing. No jets, no response teams. The Secret Service is trained to evacuate a president immediately, but nobody came for you. The question is, was it because they couldn't, or because they weren't supposed to? Lawson sat down heavily. The weight of the realization crushed him. Harris shook his head. We can't stay here. The White House is lost. Fox's team stiffened. We're not leaving, one of the women said coldly. We're taking back control. Emily stared at them. You're trying to fight? Against this? Fox nodded. We have weapons, supplies, and we've secured parts of the building. We hold this ground until we know what's really happening out there. Emily wasn't sure whether to admire their courage or call them insane. Harris, though, was done. That's suicide. He turned to Lawson. Sir, I can't force you to leave, but I strongly advise we find another way out. The president looked between them, his loyal security team, and a splinter group trying to hold on to the last scraps of power. Then, the banging on the doors stopped. It was sudden. Too sudden. Everyone turned toward the entrance, weapons raised. A single knock echoed through the silence. Then another. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Knock. 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 Slow. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Fox whispered, "That's not a zombie." Harris took a step forward. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a voice. A human voice. President Lawson. Emily froze. The voice was calm, familiar. Someone she had heard on security briefings 100 times. A chill ran down her spine. General Marcus Holloway. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he was on the other side of that door. Emily felt hope flicker in her chest. The military made it. They came for the president. But something about Holloway's voice was wrong. He spoke again, slow and measured. "Mr. President. It's time to come with us." Emily's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. Harris must have felt it too. He didn't lower his gun. Fox clenched his jaw. "That's not a request, is it?" A pause. Then, Holloway spoke again. "Open the door. Or we will open it for you." Emily's blood ran cold. The military had come. But not to save them. Silence weighed heavy in the Roosevelt room. Emily's pulse pounded as she exchanged glances with Harris and Fox. Outside, General Holloway and his men stood just beyond the doors, their presence as much a threat as the zombies still lurking through the White House. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Mr. President," Holloway's voice came again, firm but calm. "Open the door. We need to move, now." Harris shook his head. "This isn't right. Why would the military be standing out there instead of securing the perimeter?" Fox's grip tightened on his rifle. "Because they're not here to secure anything." Emily swallowed. "They're here for him." She looked at Lawson. "You." The president's face darkened. Harris motioned for everyone to stay back as he took the lead. His voice was controlled, but there was an edge of suspicion. "General, what's the situation outside? Are we in contact with NORAD? The Pentagon?" A brief pause. "We'll explain everything once you're secure." Secure. The way Holloway said it sent chills down Emily's spine. Lawson straightened his posture. General, I'm not moving a damn inch until you tell me who gave you orders. Where's the vice president? My cabinet? We have protocols in place for a situation like this. The situation has changed, sir. Emily clenched her fists. They weren't answering. They weren't telling them anything. Fox muttered under his breath. I knew it. This isn't a rescue. Harris turned back to the president. Sir, you need to make a decision. Fast. The doors shook slightly, someone testing the handle. Sir, open the door. That's an order. Emily's stomach dropped. An order? Harris's jaw tightened. With all due respect, General, the president doesn't take orders from you. A long silence. Then, a new voice joined the conversation. Stand down, Agent Harris. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. So did everyone else. Vice President Richard Monroe. Lawson stiffened. Richard? Monroe's voice remained eerily steady. It's over, Henry. Open the door. Something inside Emily snapped. Over, she whispered. What the hell does that mean? Harris turned back toward the doors, his gun still raised. Mr. Vice President, why are you giving orders instead of leading an evacuation? No response. Then, Monroe sighed. You were never meant to make it this far, Henry. The words hit like a gunshot. Emily felt her knees weaken. No. No, no, no. Lawson's face hardened. What did you just say? Open the damn door, Henry. Bang. Something slammed into the doors. Hard. Harris immediately pulled the president back. We need to move, now. Fox's team scrambled to reinforce the doors, but another massive impact nearly tore them off their hinges. They're breaching. Reed shouted. Harris cursed. Back in trance, now. They sprinted toward the adjoining hallway, Fox covering the rear. They set us up, Emily gasped, trying to keep pace. This wasn't a collapse, this was a takeover. Lawson's face was red with rage. My own vice president. He didn't finish. Another crash behind them, the doors splintered open. Gunfire erupted. Fox and his people returned fire, the room filling with the deafening roar of bullets. Emily caught a glimpse of black-clad soldiers storming in, their rifles flashing. They weren't just any troops. These were special forces. Not here to protect. Here to eliminate. Fox fired, dropping two before taking a shot to the shoulder. He stumbled back, but Reed pulled him to safety. Harris led them through another door, shoving the president ahead. We need an exit. Emily's mind raced. The Situation Room. The tunnels under the West Wing, she blurted. If they haven't been compromised. Lawson didn't hesitate. Go. They charged down the corridor. Behind them, Fox and his team held the line, buying them time. Emily's chest burned as she ran. What the hell was happening? The zombies were bad enough. But now? A military coup? In the middle of an apocalypse? And worse, Monroe was behind it. She stole a glance at the president. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was out for blood. Gunfire roared behind them as Harris, Emily, and President Lawson sprinted down the corridor. The White House, once a beacon of power and security, had turned into a war zone. Emily's breath came in short gasps. They had been set up. The vice president. The military. The whole damn thing was a planned takeover. Harris was leading them toward the West Wing, his gun raised, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. We get to the tunnels. If they aren't compromised, we're out of here. Emily risked a glance behind them. Fox and his people had stayed behind, holding the line, but the brutal reality hit her: they weren't coming. Gunfire echoed through the halls. Screams. Then, silence. Fox and his team were gone. Emily clenched her jaw. There was no time to grieve. Lawson stumbled slightly, but Harris caught him. The president was still moving, still pushing forward, even as the weight of the betrayal settled in his eyes. They turned a corner, and nearly collided with a security checkpoint. A single Secret Service agent stood there, rifle raised, aimed directly at them. Emily recognized him immediately. Agent Corman. One of the few men Lawson trusted completely. His face was pale, his grip on his weapon unsteady. "Mr. President." Corman's voice wavered. Lawson straightened. "Agent Corman." "Stand down." Corman hesitated. Emily saw it in his eyes: he was torn. "They said you were dead," Corman whispered. Harris took a step forward. "Do we look dead?" Corman's hands shook. Emily's heart pounded. If he hesitated any longer, they were done. "Corman," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "you're either with us, or with them." The agent exhaled sharply. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. "This way." Relief flooded Emily as Corman turned and led them past the checkpoint. "The tunnels, are they still secure?" Harris asked. Corman didn't answer immediately. He swallowed. They were. But an hour ago, the vice president's men started moving troops into position. "They've blocked most of the exits." Emily's stomach twisted. "Most?" Corman gave her a sharp look. "One exit might still be open. The emergency evac tunnel under the Situation Room." Harris didn't hesitate. "Then that's where we're going." They moved quickly, navigating through darkened hallways. The White House, once so alive with staff and security, felt like a tomb. Then, a sound. Not gunfire. A growl. Emily turned just in time to see a figure lurch out of a doorway. Its face was barely human, skin sloughing off in wet, meaty strips. Milky white eyes locked onto them. It snarled and charged. Bang! Corman fired. The zombie's head snapped back, but it kept coming. Harris fired twice. The creature collapsed at their feet. Then, the moaning started. More were coming. Corman swore. "They're in the halls. Move!" Harris barked. They ran. The tunnels were close. So damn close. The hallway twisted ahead, then opened into a stairwell leading down. Corman pointed. "Through there." They dashed forward, when suddenly, a voice rang out behind them. "Stop right there." Emily turned, her blood ran cold. At the top of the stairs stood a squad of armed soldiers. And at their center, Vice President Monroe. He stood tall, his expensive suit slightly disheveled but his expression calm. Calculated. "Henry," he said smoothly, "this is pointless." President Lawson froze. Emily felt the tension coil like a spring. Harris gritted his teeth. His gun was still raised. "Sir, we don't have time for this." Monroe took a step forward. The soldiers didn't move. Their rifles were aimed, but they weren't firing. Yet. "Henry," Monroe continued, his voice almost gentle, "there's no escape. It's over." Emily clenched her fists. "You did this." Her voice was sharp, full of anger. Monroe didn't even blink. "I did what had to be done." Lawson snapped. "You betrayed your country." His voice boomed through the hall. Monroe sighed. "No, Henry. I saved it." Harris stepped in front of Lawson. Enough talking. Emily saw it. The flicker in Monroe's eyes. A signal. The soldiers raised their weapons. Harris moved first, gun up, finger on the trigger. Then, chaos. A deafening crash came from the hall behind Monroe. Screams. Something burst through the walls, a flood of zombies, fast and ravenous. The soldiers barely had time to react before the first one was ripped down. Monroe stumbled back, eyes wide. What the? Harris didn't hesitate. Go. Corman grabbed Lawson and shoved him toward the tunnel. Emily sprinted with them, heart hammering. Behind her, bullets flew, soldiers screaming, zombies tearing into them. Monroe was still alive, his bodyguards pulling him back, but he was trapped. Emily didn't look back. They charged into the tunnel. As the door slammed shut behind them, muffling the sounds of the massacre, Emily realized the truth. Monroe wasn't the one in control anymore. The dead were. The tunnel was dark, damp, and suffocatingly narrow. Each footstep echoed, every breath felt too loud. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped her rifle. She stole a glance at President Lawson. He was moving, but his face was pale, his eyes distant. They had just barely escaped. Above them, chaos reigned. Monroe's forces were likely torn apart, but the bastard himself was still alive. And if he lived, that meant he'd be coming for them. Harris took the lead, his movements sharp and controlled. Corman, how far to the exit? The Secret Service agent exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. Quarter mile, give or take. If the hatch isn't sealed, we'll be out within 10 minutes. Emily wasn't reassured. A military coup. A zombie outbreak. And they were trapped between both. She clenched her jaw. If the tunnel isn't sealed, what's waiting for us on the other side? Corman didn't answer. The silence spoke volumes. Lawson suddenly stopped. Everyone turned. The president was staring straight ahead, eyes locked on something in the darkness. Emily followed his gaze. At first, she saw nothing. Just more tunnel. Then, she saw it. A body. Slumped against the wall, half-eaten, barely recognizable. The stench hit her first, thick and putrid. Then, the movement. The corpse's chest cavity shifted. A sickening, wet squelch. Emily stepped back. The body jerked. Something was inside. Harris aimed his gun. Stay sharp. Then, it happened. A thin, writhing mass of flesh burst from the chest cavity. A nest. Tiny, spindly creatures, their bodies glistening with blood and rot, scattered out of the remains like spiders fleeing a nest. What the hell? Corman cursed and raised his weapon, but Harris grabbed his arm. Don't shoot, he hissed. Emily's stomach turned. The creatures, whatever they were, weren't attacking. They were avoiding them. Skittering past their boots, retreating into cracks along the tunnel walls. Emily's heart pounded. They weren't zombies. They were something else. Corman exhaled shakily. What the hell was that? Nobody answered. Harris didn't wait to find out. Move. They pushed forward, the air growing heavier. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly. Thud. A sound from ahead. Harris froze. Then, a whisper. A low, rasping sound. Emily gripped her gun tighter. Then, something moved. Just at the edge of their flashlight beams. We are not alone, Corman whispered. A shape lurched into view. At first, Emily thought it was a person. Then, she saw its eyes. Glowing. Pale. Hungry. Then, more of them emerged. Dozens. Not zombies. Something worse. Harris didn't hesitate. Run. They sprinted. The creatures shrieked, their voices echoing through the tunnels. Emily risked a glance back, and immediately regretted it. They were fast. Faster than any zombie she had ever seen. And they were gaining. Corman veered left. This way. Emily followed, just as a clawed hand swiped at her. She ducked, barely avoiding the strike. Harris turned and fired. Bang! Bang! The nearest creature dropped, but the rest kept coming. Corman skidded to a stop at a heavy metal hatch. The exit. He grabbed the wheel and turned it. It didn't budge. No, no, no. Harris slammed against it, helping turn the wheel. Emily, cover us. She spun, her rifle kicking against her shoulder. Bang! Bang! The creatures shrieked as bullets ripped through them, but it wasn't enough. They were surrounded. Lawson suddenly stepped forward. Emily barely had time to process before he grabbed a flare from Corman's belt. And lit it. The tunnel flashed red. The creatures reeled back. Hissing. Afraid. Emily's breath caught. They feared fire. The president didn't hesitate. He threw the flare. The creatures screamed as it landed among them. Just as the hatch finally opened. Go! Emily shoved Lawson inside. Corman, Harris, and Emily followed, slamming the door behind them. Bang! Something slammed against the other side. The creatures screeched, their howls of rage filling the tunnel. Emily stumbled forward, her heart pounding. They were alive. But as she turned to look at the others, she realized something terrifying. They weren't safe. Not yet. Because on the other side of the hatch, someone was waiting. A familiar figure. Vice President Monroe. Standing with armed soldiers. And this time, there was no escape. Emily's breath caught as she raised her rifle, sweat dripping down her face. The cold barrel of a soldier's rifle pressed against her temple before she could aim. They were surrounded. Monroe stood just beyond the ring of armed soldiers, his suit disheveled, his face smeared with dirt and blood. He adjusted his tie like a man who had already won. Drop your weapons, he ordered, his voice smooth. No one moved. Emily's hands tightened around her rifle. Harris, standing beside her, his weapon still raised, gritted his teeth. You're outnumbered, Monroe continued. Do you really want to die here? The soldiers around them shifted, fingers tensed on triggers. Corman was breathing heavily, his hands hovering over his sidearm. He's right. We don't have a choice. Emily looked at Lawson. The president's jaw was set, his eyes hard. For a moment, she thought he would resist. Then, with a slow exhale, he let his weapon fall to the ground. Harris cursed under his breath, but followed suit. Emily hesitated, then reluctantly dropped her rifle. The soldiers moved in, yanking them apart, zip-tying their wrists. Monroe stepped closer, staring at Lawson like a predator savoring its prey. I told you, Henry, he said softly. This is pointless. Lawson's face remained expressionless. You just sentenced yourself to death, Monroe. Monroe smirked. I don't think so. Behind him, a massive steel door stood slightly ajar. A military bunker. Emily's stomach twisted. Of course. Monroe's escape plan had been here all along. Bring them inside, Monroe commanded. The soldiers shoved them forward. They were led into a large underground facility, its walls lined with high-tech monitors and communication terminals. Maps of the entire country were displayed on massive screens, all marked with infection zones. Emily's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a control center. He knew. Monroe had been planning for this. She exchanged a look with Harris, who was coming to the same realization. Monroe didn't just survive the outbreak. He anticipated it. And now, he was ready to seize control. Monroe turned to his soldiers. Lock them in holding. I'll deal with them soon. The soldiers dragged them down a narrow corridor lined with reinforced steel doors. Cells. One by one, they were thrown inside. Emily hit the cold concrete floor hard. The door slammed shut behind her. Darkness. She scrambled to her feet, pressing against the door. Damn it! Across from her, Harris was already working his zip ties against the sharp edge of the bench. We need to get out of here, he muttered. Lawson sat calmly in his own cell, staring at the ceiling. Emily could barely contain her rage. You knew, didn't you? She whispered. Monroe didn't just betray you. He helped make this happen. The president exhaled slowly. I had my suspicions. But I never thought he'd go this far. Emily clenched her fists. He doesn't just want to take over, does he? Lawson's eyes met hers. No. He wants to remake the world. A heavy silence settled over them. Then, a beep. Emily froze. A voice echoed from a speaker in the ceiling. Monroe's voice. I imagine you're wondering what happens next. Emily's stomach tightened. Monroe continued, his tone almost casual. This isn't just about power, Henry. It's about survival. The old world is gone. The only way to rebuild is with the right leadership. Lawson's expression darkened. You mean dictatorship? Monroe chuckled. Call it what you want. But I've already secured what's left of the military. I have the resources to outlast the infection. And you? A pause. You're just loose ends. Emily's blood ran cold. Then, another beep. A red warning light flickered on the ceiling. A voice, automated, cold, mechanical. Facility self-destruct sequence initiated. Evacuate immediately. Emily's breath caught. What? Monroe's voice came back, smug and victorious. You didn't think I'd let you linger, did you? Harris was already working faster on his restraints. He's going to bury us alive. Emily's heart pounded. Monroe had played them from the start. And now? He was about to erase them. A final loose end, tied off with fire. Facility self-destruct sequence initiated. Evacuate immediately. The cold, robotic voice repeated its warning as red emergency lights flashed across the underground bunker. Emily's heart pounded. They had minutes, maybe less, before the whole place went up in flames. Move! Harris snarled, finally snapping his zip ties against the edge of the metal bench. He immediately turned and began working on the keypad beside his cell door. Across the hallway, President Lawson remained eerily calm, his face unreadable. Emily struggled against her own restraints, twisting her wrists to loosen the plastic, ignoring the sting as her skin burned from friction. Harris swore under his breath. Damn it, this keypad is encrypted. I need a workaround. Lawson finally spoke, his voice steady. Check under the panel. If this is an old military system, there's usually a manual override. Harris didn't hesitate. He yanked at the keypad's casing, exposing a tangle of colored wires. Emily, still restrained, gritted her teeth. Monroe had outplayed them. Set them up. Used them. And now, he was going to burn them alive while he walked free. The very thought infuriated her. She twisted her wrists one last time, and felt the zip tie snap. Yes. No time to waste. She lunged at the keypad outside her own cell, ripping at the wires. Sparks flew. Click. Her door slid open. Emily didn't pause to breathe. She sprinted to Lawson's cell while Harris worked on Corman's. 30 seconds to detonation. Emily nearly panicked. They weren't going to make it. Then, a gunshot. Emily froze. Harris had fired directly into the keypad of the last cell. The door slid open. Corman stumbled out, wide-eyed. "We need an exit, now." Lawson was already moving, his mind calculating the best course. There's only one way Monroe could have left, an emergency tunnel. They sprinted back to the main control room. Emily's eyes darted across the screens, still displaying America in flames. The infection zones were expanding. There was no stopping it. And Monroe? He was likely long gone. Emily's fists clenched. Harris scanned the room. There. He pointed to a hatch in the floor, half hidden beneath a desk. 15 seconds to detonation. Corman didn't wait. He ripped the hatch open, revealing a dark shaft leading downward. A ladder. No time to hesitate. One by one, they climbed down. Emily was last. Just as she descended, the world above erupted. Boom! The entire facility shook violently. Heat roared down the tunnel as she scrambled to safety, diving into the darkness just as fire exploded above her. The force threw her forward. Then, silence. She gasped for breath, feeling the weight of rubble above them. They had barely survived. The bunker was gone. Monroe had won. For now. The escape. The tunnel stretched on for miles. Their only option was to keep moving. For hours, they walked in silence. No one spoke of what had just happened. Then, finally, an exit. Emily emerged into the cool night air, her lungs burning. They were in a dense forest, far from Washington. And in the distance? A helicopter. Monroe's helicopter. Still waiting. Harris exchanged a look with Emily. They weren't done yet. The final confrontation. The team moved quickly, silently. Monroe stood near the chopper, barking orders to his remaining guards. He had survived the outbreak. Survived their confrontation. But he wasn't going to walk away. Emily raised her rifle. Lawson stepped forward, his voice commanding. "Monroe." The vice president spun. His eyes widened. "That's impossible." Bang. Harris fired first. A guard dropped. The rest scrambled for cover. Emily charged forward, her heart pounding. One shot. That's all she needed. She aimed. Pulled the trigger. Bang. Monroe staggered back, clutching his side. Blood seeped through his fingers. Emily stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "This is for everyone you betrayed." Monroe laughed weakly, even as he fell to his knees. "It doesn't matter." He coughed, his voice fading. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning." His eyes darkened. The real monsters haven't even arrived yet. Then, his body slumped. He was gone. Aftermath. The team took the helicopter. As they flew over the burning city, Emily couldn't shake Monroe's final words. The real monsters. Was he talking about the undead? Or something worse? She didn't know. But as she looked at Lawson, at Harris, at Corman, she knew one thing for sure. They had survived this battle. And whatever came next, they would be ready. The end. For now.